notes in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly.
The year was the year in which I was born. In Uniontown, Pennsylvania, was in 1919, and that was 2 years after my mother and father were married, and they had moved to Point Marion, Pennsylvania, and they decided to have a baby, and I was the baby. That was a very fortunate thing for me, and I was the first of 2 children for my father and mother. My younger brother was born 5 or 6 years later. My father's father was from Wales, and he was a medical doctor, having come to the United States and graduated from a Philadelphia University as a medical doctor. And he lived about 20 miles away from our home in Point Marion, Pennsylvania, in Vanderbilt, Pennsylvania. And I would occasionally get a chance to go visit with him on a Saturday when my father wasn't working anymore. He would deliver babies on Saturday morning, and I would get to go with him in the car, not knowing much about the delivery of babies, but I would sit in the car while he went into the house, and 2 hours later, the baby would be born, and he would come back and tell me that he had just had a baby to deliver. And that was a fun experience for a little kid who was hardly a teenager at that time. But he was a very, very fine man, and he taught my father to be a good educator, and Dad went into school teaching and gradually became the principal of a school in Point Marion, Pennsylvania. And my parents taught me to read before I was 5 years old, and they sent me off to school and put me in the 2nd grade. So I was about 3 years younger than most of my classmates. And that persisted through college life. We talked about my father. Mother's parents came from Germany and moved to Morgantown, West Virginia, which is the seat of University of West Virginia. And they were in the real estate business primarily in Morgantown, but she went to school at West Virginia University and graduated in about 1912, I think, as a musician. And she became a piano teacher and a piano player and an organist. And she was professionally an organist for the Ladies Masonic Society, the Eastern Star. And she was their national organist for a number of years. And she taught piano at home in Point Marion to a number of young children whom I got to meet as they came to our house every day to learn about the piano. I never became very good at the piano, but I was interested in music and became a saxophone player and a clarinetist. We were very fortunate. My dad, having the summers off, we went in a Willie's night. His father, the doctor, gave him a Willie's night in about 1927 or 25. And Dad took us and my brother who was just a few years old then, and we went to California. We drove all the way. And, Mother did the cooking. He fixed the right-hand running board. There was a running boards in those days that stretched the length of the car. And he put a kit on there for food preparation and so forth. And Mother, we had a tent in the back of the car, and we occasionally would sleep in a motel, which were just beginning to exist on the highways in those days. But mostly we slept in tents. We had a tent, and we went all the way. We went to Salinas, Kansas, and we never saw another concrete or paved road from Salinas, Kansas, until we got to San Bernardino, California. Got sunburned, terribly sunburned for the first time in our lives by being on Long Beach as a coastal area. And we didn't know, but if you stand out in the sun, you get burned. And we didn't know about that. Well, we bought gas for the car. In those days, there was 7 gallons for $1. And you can't believe that, but we bought gas for cars at the cheapest place. And if we could find a place that would give 8 gallons for $1, you bought it by $1. And the competitors would give you more or less gallons for $1. And that was a very exciting thing. The rooms were $8 a night if they're very high priced. And we had wonderful trips across the country. He took me all the way through New England several times, and into Canada several times, and I think it was 1931 we had our second trip to California. I was age 16 when I graduated from high school, and therefore I was a very young man, because most of the people who were my classmates had gone to preparatory schools, and some of them were the equivalent of sophomores in college, and other universities to train for their Annapolis enrollment. So I was a very young guy, 16 years and about 4 months old. And my father was a friend of our congressman, and congressman had appointees to the academies, both West Point and Annapolis. And he offered me the opportunity of becoming a candidate for an Annapolis position. And they fortunately, at that time, although we weren't very high on the list of priorities to be selected, the recession was on in 1935 when I graduated from high school, and the Congress increased the size of the entering class at both West Point and Annapolis, particularly Annapolis, by over 200 people. And an extra 200 people were selected, and including me. And I was very fortunate to have that happen. So in the middle of July, in the summer of 1935, I went to Annapolis and became, surprisingly enough, the youngest man in the Navy. The only reason I remember that is that it was the 90th anniversary of the founding of Annapolis, the U.S. Naval Academy. And the NBC people in the fall of 1935 decided that they would have some ceremony to honor the Naval Academy's 90th birthday. And so they asked the Naval Academy who was the youngest guy in the Navy, and it was I. And they had a radio program at Annapolis one night, and I was allowed to speak on the national radio. My father and mother listened to it back home in Point Marion, Pennsylvania, and it was the first time I'd ever done anything on public radio. But we had also the oldest man in the Navy speaking. He was a 93-year-old retired admiral somewhere. And I thought it was a great thing because I was allowed out of the Annapolis dormitories for the first time after 8 o'clock at night. And I was able to get out at 9:30 or so at night and go over to an auditorium where thousands of people were there to hear me tell them about how wonderful it was at Annapolis. Well, the time at Annapolis was wonderful. I had a very good time. I had a difficult time of finding out what to do competitively because they insisted on a competitive position. And I've mentioned before that I found out that they had a rifle team and I would be selected to participate in the rifle team. And I used that later on in my college career. But I think it's important to remember that I didn't graduate from Annapolis in the class of 1939. Instead, the Congress had reduced the prospectus for the Naval Academy in 1936, and we were all advised, all of the people who had been in the class of 1939, that we had to pass our physical examinations one more time in order to continue our education. And my eyes had deteriorated, heavily studied. I used the excuse that I had studied too hard and read everything in the books, and I'd lost my 20/20 vision. On one eye was only 12/20, and despite the fact that they allowed me to go to Washington, D.C. to have optical improvement tests done, they failed, and I was kicked out, along with about 220 other members of my classmate on June the 2nd, 1937. And we were kicked out, and the Naval Academy was 200 people less in attendance. Great savings to the stockholders of the United States of America. Well, what did I do when I got kicked out? Fortunately, there was a movie studio that was coming to Annapolis to take a picture, and we were allowed to keep our uniforms, those of us who had just got kicked out on June 2nd, and we were allowed to enlist as candidates for extras in the movie, and so we did for the next 3 weeks. In June of 37, we were candidates for and accepted as the movie extras. And that was a first time we'd ever had a job, most of us. And we got paid for sitting around with all those stars and cameras and so forth at that time. Fortunately, you were forced into roommates. You had no choice of the roommate. And one of the roommates that I had, especially in the freshman year and the sophomore year, was Henry Singleton, who had studied highly scientific in the Texas University for a year or two before he had gone to Annapolis. And he knew he's the best mathematician I've ever met in my life, and he was a great engineer later on. He and I worked together, and we formed companies. He also failed to graduate in the class of 1939 because he had a physical defect when he was a junior, the year later than I did, and he went off to MIT and got a doctorate degree. And we kept in close touch with each other over the years, just as our friendship of roommate together at Annapolis. He taught me an awful lot about mathematics. He was an expert in mathematics. He was so good that he was #1 in the class the first 2 years. But he had taught me enough about it that I was #8 in math, which was an absolutely astounding thing to me. But he went on to get a doctorate in science and mathematics at MIT. And he helped the Navy in the development of radar during World War II. After I left the Naval Academy, I had a problem with what was I going to do next? I was very much interested in furthering my education. My mother and father insisted that I continue to work towards getting a doctorate degree. They never would stop talking about the fact that I was going to do that. And my father, knew of the name of the Dean of Engineering at Carnegie Tech in Pittsburgh, and they thought we should meet. And so he arranged for a meeting, and I went there and with my father, and we had a meeting with the Dean of Engineering. And he was having a meeting of his professors in the same room. We interposed on that, and we were there. The dean said, "Come on up." And so we went into this room where he had these other professors meeting. And as a result of that meeting, I was asked, "What do you want to study?" And I said, "I don't know, I think mathematics." And a voice in the back of the room spoke up and said, "Why don't you study metallurgy?" And I said, "I don't know how to spell that." And he said, "You spell it with 2 L's. And as a result of that fun that caused, I got to meet him. And he was Dr. Robert F. Mayle, the head of the metallurgy school at Carnegie Tech. And he arranged for me to become a full junior at Carnegie Tech the next year in September, if I would study in August and take a special course of making up some deficiencies in chemistry that the Naval Academy had not taught me, but they required. And so I was able to get a fellow who later became the president of the university to teach me some chemistry in August. And later, working with Dr. Mayle, I became a candidate for a doctorate. And I did my thesis under him in 1942. And I graduated in 1942 at the age of, with a doctor's degree at the age of 23. And I was very fortunate to have him meet me and me meet him. And that university was such an outstanding place, and still is. It's now, I was made a member of the board of directors of it for years, and at the time I was on the board, we decided to merge with the Mellon Institute of Technology, which had a large chemistry research organization, and we formed that became the name of the university, then was changed to Carnegie Mellon University, and CMU is now in existence as a very major institution in Pittsburgh. Dr. Mayle introduced me to the Bell Telephone Laboratories, and I was able to go to New York for 4 months in one summer, and worked for Bell Telephone Laboratories, Earl Shoemaker and others, and it was a wonderful experience for me. Not only did I get to see New York and live traveling back and forth in the subways from a small room at the YMCA to 14th Street, where then the Bell Telephone Laboratories had its major laboratory. Now it's in New Jersey. But I was able to do some vacuum melting there. And subsequently that became a very important part of metallurgy and material science. And I was able to participate in that for the first time in melting things in a vacuum. Vacuum melting is a way of melting steel without any oxygen or air or nitrogen or other things that are in the atmosphere becoming wet. Iron and most of the other materials, metals, love oxygen, and they form scale or oxides. And if you heat them up at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, where they are melted, and there's any oxygen around or any nitrogen around, they become a part of the cast product, which is the ingot or the product that you're making out of this melted material. So it was a very good thing to be able to take a little piece of iron and melt it in a vacuum and see if the properties were different. And some of the melting that we did in those days were in 10 and 15 pound and 20 pound. Later on in my career, we were able to build 1,000 pound melting furnaces, and then we later got to be 3,000 pound melting furnaces, and today we're making giant melting furnaces that will be completely evacuated with no contaminants allowed involved. Well, in college I was able to join a fraternity that was a friend of mine who had preceded me at Point Marion. Was a very good friend of mine, and he had gone to West Virginia University while I was at the Naval Academy, and he had joined the Beta fraternity, and he was a very personal friend at my town of Point Marion. When I came back to Point Marion, I found that he was living in the Beta house in Morgantown, and so when I came to Carnegie Tech, I found that there was a Beta fraternity, and I became acquainted with one or two of the people who asked me to join, and I was happy to do that because I was joining Elmer Jones from Point Marion in the same fraternity, and that was we were probably the only two guys ever in Point Marion, from Point Marion, who were Betas, but we were that. At that time, Carnegie Mellon University was at football prowess. It certainly is not that now. But at that time, we used to play Notre Dame and occasionally win a game. And they enlisted a lot of freshmen to join the university who were football players. And I found out that two of my friends whom I had just met were in my class as a junior, but they were on the football team. And there were five of us, four of whom were in the football area, and me, was a tiny little me, and we called ourselves the Filthy Five. And so we stayed together as a friendly little sub-club in the fraternity, and kept in touch with each other subsequently in our university life, in our industrial life. And they all became engineers and leaders of the activities of some companies. Well, my first wife was a student at Carnegie Tech when I got to Carnegie Tech from the Naval Academy, and I had to to take German and French as special courses, because at the Naval Academy we learned Spanish, And in order to get a doctorate degree, you had to be able to read the initial language, the initial papers that were written in both France and Germany. And so I met this girl by the name of Betty, who was a German student of mine. And she lived in Pittsburgh. Her father and mother lived there, and they were in the business world, the lumber business. Had some forests in northern Pennsylvania. And she and I started to date each other. And it turned out that she had been in love with another fraternity brother of mine, and I was able to defeat him on this pursuit of her attentions, and so we got married. And we had 3 children, Tom and Bill, married, and they're all happy and married with 3, 2 and 2 children, and a lot of grandchildren. And so it was a very, very pleasant experience to be able to find Betty in Pittsburgh. And that was my first marriage.
Dream of dreams really do come true. Someday you wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, and the dream that you dare to, oh why can't well, I see trees of green and red roses too. I'll watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Well, I see skies of blue, and I see clouds of white, and the brightness of day. I like the dark, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, singing, how do you do? They really say, I love you. I hear babies cry, and I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than we'll know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like a lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. And the dreams that you dare to, why, oh why can't
it was easily a wonderful thing, and for me, after World War II, to see the government do two things. First of all, the destruction of, I was now a metallurgist and knew something about making steel and building plants for the making of steel. And it turned out that both in Italy and in France, there had been small steel companies that were more or less destroyed. And the Marshall Plan paid for the reconstruction of a number of Italian and French companies. And I was selected by various people to go and do a rebuilding of a French and an Italian steel mill. I did this in the Alps of Italy, north of Venice, and Torino, and in France, in the middle of France, at a place called Coventry. And we rebuilt small steel mills, and it was fun. We eventually were able to capitalize those things as a new business, and they were made a part of the free enterprise system of European finances at that time. The other thing that I'm very pleased for, the United States government did at the end of World War II, was to allow returning soldiers who had never been to college to be free and go to college. It's called the GI Bill of Rights, and they thousands and thousands of soldiers were educated in the United States college system by the GI Bill of Rights, and a number of them started companies. They were taught how to do things. They had already been in service in the war, and here in 48 and 49 and 50, they were now graduating from college and starting new enterprises. They had occasionally been, one or two of them, had known how to start a company, and they did that. Now, along about 1960, these companies were some 20 years old, and the fathers who had started them were still running them, and their children were growing up now to be teenagers, and they kept wondering, what are we going to do with these kids, and what are we going to do with the company? And they were not necessarily publicly financed, but as a result of all of that, the conglomerate business of the United States prospered, because they wanted to sell their companies and continue them in the world of finance, and continue to keep the companies going. And we were able, as a part of Teledyne, one of the early conglomerates that I was associated with, to buy these companies and keep them there in their own town. The children would tend to move in and replace their fathers who wanted to retire and had deserved the chance to form the companies. And we were able to buy 130 companies in Teledyne, of which a number were GI Bill of Rights started companies in the 40s, late 40s. And it was a very marvelous thing for the United States and for Teledyne to be able to do that. Well, when I met Dr. Mayo and worked for Bell Telephone Laboratories the second summer, he introduced me to a steel company in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, called Vanadium Alloys Steel Company, and I went to work there. And eventually I became the chief metallurgist of that company and a vice president of technology, and eventually everybody else kind of died and I got to be president of the company. It was a fine privately held steel company, and we had a ball making specialty steels. We made tool steels primarily, and I was hired. One of the first jobs I did as a young metallurgist was to write a book on tool steels with the help of the founding father, the chief metallurgist Jim Gill. And he and I partnered a book, which was my first book, written in 1944, about 2 years after I had started with him. And That book has had 5 or 6 editions since that time with other co-authors, but my name has been on it, and it's been a leading seller in the industrial world about the technology of tool steel. Well, while I was doing all that, Henry Singleton had gone to MIT, gotten a doctor's degree, and had learned about the computer business, the world of technology and the computer sciences, and had worked for a number of companies when he was hired by Tex Thornton, who had hired, he had get Cy Ramo to go to the East and buy him the best brains that he could. And he brought Henry Singleton out to join Tex Thornton at Litton Industries. And that lasted until 1960, when George Kosmetsky and Henry Singleton had formed a new company to compete in the technical world called Teledyne. Meantime, Henry and I had socially kept in touch with each other, having been roommates together, and in college at the Naval Academy. And we kept in close touch with each other by going to summer vacations together in Cape May, New Jersey. And we kept jokingly saying that if we ever got to be presidents of companies, we might merge the companies. Well, indeed, that's what we kept on doing, and I was president of Vanadium Alloy Steel Company, and he was president of Teledyne. In 1966, we merged the companies, and Vasco, the metals, became a part of technical leadership in the aviation industry and in the computer industry, because he was making all the black boxes, and we were building radars, and we were building airplane engines and airplanes at Ryan Aeronautical in San Diego. And so we were a variety company. And Henry and I had a ball for years, 25 years together running Teledyne. It was a large company. Recently I wrote a book called Distant Force, which is the word Teledyne, meaning distant force. Dyne, dynamic, is a word for force. So Distant Force was written as a tribute to Henry Singleton, who passed away 10 or 15 years ago, and about 1990. And he started that company, and the story of his company, which eventually, after he and I retired, after he died in 90, I retired in 93, and the company was modified and successfully merged into Allegheny Ludlam Steel Company, who was very much interested in forming the technical additions of Vasco or Vanadium Alloy Steel Company to their things. We built a big vacuum melting plant, largest in the world, down in South Carolina, and we were very much interested in forming this. So the merged company was called Allegheny Teledyne. Later on, Allegheny Teledyne, having joined with me, I was on the board, had decided to spin off the companies. We spun off the water pick companies to a publicly held incidental company. We spun off Teledyne Technologies, and the former head of Carnegie Mellon University, Dr. Morabian, is now running that in the Los Angeles, California area. And we spun off to all the metals companies, to Allegheny itself, and that's a company called Allegheny Technologies, or ATI. And ATI Allvac is a big part of that, and that was our old plant in North and South Carolinas, where we primarily vacuum melted things that I was so happy to learn about back in the 1940s at Bell Telephone Laboratories. One of the products was the Teledyne Systems Company and its manufacture of all of the black boxes, all of the instrumentation for commercial airplanes. You're familiar with the fact that the black box is something that's always recovered in the case of an accident. And it has recorded all of the things that are happening in the airplane. It has not only all of the bad things that happen, but all of the good things, like the list of all the passengers and the cost, the stewardesses, list of stewardesses and the things that the stewardesses transmits to about each flight to the ground. And so these are all part of it measures the stresses on all the instrumentations and so forth. So that's the nature of that thing. We built airplanes at San Diego. We built the new idea. We built airplane engines, jet engines, in Toledo, Ohio, at a company called CAE, Continental Aviation, which was a division of the old Continental Motors Company, which made all the piston engines for airplanes and still does make piston engines for airplanes. So we were in the aircraft business, both from a standpoint of technology and of engines and metallurgy. Mainly after my wife died, I was able to walk around. I'm a walker. I did all my exercise in walking, and I walk around the building, and I found her one Sunday morning walking around up at her house and or near her house. I was walking on the sidewalk, and I said hello, and we very gradually knew each other. And I said, "Where are you going?" She said, "I was going to church," and so I went to church with her. And we became very friendly. And she had suffered for about 5 years of putting her husband through a care home, and he finally died. And we decided that it would be a very good thing to continue to go to the same church. And after we did that, we decided that we should be married again. We've had good marriages, and we liked it. So we, even though we're a little bit aged, we decided that it would be a good thing to do. So we got married. She said yes. Well, first of all, I must say, she has a 90-plus-year-old mother in Arkansas, and I had to ask her first. Tom is a great student. He came to Carnegie Tech because I had been there as a graduate there, and we were living in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and he went to Pittsburgh and started and graduated in metallurgy as an engineer, and then decided he wanted to be a lawyer. And he went right across the street from Carnegie Tech to Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, right across the street, and became a lawyer. And he's been a successful lawyer all this time, working in Harrisburg, having a couple of children by his first marriage, and he married a second time with a lady who had several girls, and they're still living in my old house in Seven Springs, Pennsylvania, by the way. The second one was a boy by the name of Bill, and Bill's family has been very fine. He is a financial guy. He started out as a financial auditor for corporations, and he wrote the book on how you audit banks when banks required to be audited and were required to be audited. And he wrote the book. He eventually became a senior vice president of a bank in Chicago, and which is now Bank One, and he's had several wonderful children. And the third one is Mary, who went to a private school in Baltimore and met some people from England who introduced her on a summer vacation educational trip that she had to a boy who was their son, and they got married in my house in Sylvania at Seven Springs. And they've been over there running a department store, which very successfully for years, the family department store in Farnham, England. And they now sold that and retired. They're retired to a place in the mountains of France, in the ski country. Retired to a place next to their brother, Bill, in Florida, and just travel around every once in a while, doing this, that, and the other thing. With a family of three in England. Hey, we've gone on cruises a lot, and I love cruises. I really love to just sit back and wait for 2 weeks and let some guy run the ship and just tell me when I go ashore, that I can go ashore now and just enjoy wherever he's taken me. I've enjoyed going to Turkey and Greece and Egypt and all the Mediterranean. I've enjoyed going to Russia. I was very pleased one time we went on the Seabourn to Russia, to Vladivostok, and we came in there and landed one morning. This was communism and the United States were not too close together, but this was a part. Finally, we were allowed to go to Moscow, and we went there and landed at this border, and I couldn't believe it. I heard a band on the shoreline playing the Star Spangled Banner as we walked into Russia, and that trip was absolutely astounding. People were very anxious to show us their country, and it was a marvelous country. And they talked about the kings and the emperors that they had had, and they didn't talk about communism as anything good. And we were allowed to go to see all of the wonderful places in Moscow and in the countryside. It was a fine thing for me and the family, part of the family that was with me at the time. And very happy to be part of God's world. And I've always enjoyed praying, and it's been a very great help to me. And to become a member of various churches. I've been a member of a Methodist church and Presbyterian churches, Episcopal churches, and I've married girls from different churches and joined them in their church. My present wife is Ellen, a Christian, member of the Central Christian Church in Dallas, Texas, and I've joined with her in her church. I find that they worship the same God. I think some of the success of long life that I have, the reason that I may have been able to live this long is because I've had good advice about diet and care. I've done that since I started to have my executives at Vanadium Alloy Steel Company go to White Sulphur Springs And we met some doctors down there who were very unique in their control of cholesterol and heart conditions and so forth like that. And I've been following their advice ever since. It's unique advice, and it caused me to lose a lot of weight, from 185 pounds down to 160 pounds. And over the last 25 years, I've been gradually doing that, and we don't eat things like beef but once a month, and we only eat eggs once a week, and we eat fish every day if we can, and we are very strict about the diet. And as far as exercise is concerned, we belong to fitness clubs and use bicycles a ways, and we do a lot of walking. I walk at least 2 miles a day at a fairly clip. I don't run. Old Cooper of the Cooper Clinic, the doctor here in Los Angeles, in Dallas, has talked to me a lot of times about just continuing the idea of running. And he used to be a speedster and recommended that everybody jog. And he's gotten away from that because that's too hard on your knees and so forth. And he is now just a runner and a bike guy. Well, it was very great to beat Notre Dame at football field. You know, competitively, it's interesting to beat anybody else in any sport. I remember very much being on the Naval Academy rifle team and going to Carnegie Tech. I found out they also had a rifle team, and it was a real thrill a year or so later to be on the Carnegie Tech rifle team, and we went to Annapolis and beat the Annapolis Naval rifle team, which I had been on as a sophomore. And we like to do that. You didn't have to be a 500-pound guy in order to participate in intercollegiate sports. You could do it as a skinny little kid. The rifle that we shot was a 22 caliber rifle, and that's a common rifle sport, and it exists in most every town in the United States. There's a rifle gallery someplace, and there's an awful lot of teams of people who even today are participating in 22 caliber rifles shooting as a competitive thing. Yes, I've been fortunate enough to belong to a few clubs, particularly the Los Angeles Country Club, of which I was a president at one time. And I've been the president of several golf clubs, members of the Latrobe Country Club, where we had a good golfer by the name of Arnold Palmer, studying under his father, who was the golf pro there. And I got to meet them when I first met to Latrobe, Pennsylvania. But in Los Angeles Country Club, we had enlisted the assistantship of Ronald Reagan to help us play golf occasionally after he was president and retired. And his office was very close, about 2 blocks away from the country club, which I had also served as president. And I was able to invite him for lunch occasionally. And he would play 9 holes of golf with me the afternoon with his escorts from the Secret Service, of course. But he would ride in my golf cart. And we'd get to the 9th hole and finish up the 9th hole, and we'd come to the 10th tee, and he would leave. And I kept insisting that he play the second of 9 of golf with me at one time or another, and he never did. He insisted on going back to work. and not tying up the Secret Service agents who were being paid for by the government with him riding around in the golf court all afternoon, because they insisted that it was their job to be with him at all times. And so it was fun. But I played with Nixon, and I played with President Ward, and one or two others. It was very, very fun, much fun. This is a problem of which kind of computer are you going to run. I'm a Mac man, and the reason is that Henry Singleton and Art Rock were Mac men. Art Rock is a financier from San Francisco who originally was with a company called Hayden Stone that did the initial financing for Henry Singleton and George Kosmetsky when they started Teledyne and in 1960. So it turns out that Art Rock is a good friend of Steve Jobs, who runs Apple, and who was on the board of Apple, and anything that was made by Apple we had to have in our computers. And our whole Teledyne business was built on, and I was taught to use an Apple computer, Macintosh origin. And so we didn't use any other computers except the Apple. And it was very successful as far as I was concerned, and it was a very fine device. Oh, I remember my first date was with a young lady who was a sister of that fellow that joined the Betas, and she was a neighbor of mine, and I loved to take her out, and we would sit in the rumble seat of the car and occasionally have our first kiss. Oh, I can't remember exactly what my first car was. It's been a Ford of some sort. Yes, it was a Ford, Model A, a Model A Ford that I paid a few $100s for, and in the 30s. That was it. And I've driven Ford cars, gradually even getting up to a Mercury and a Lincoln, until most recently in my life, when the only non-U.S. car I've ever driven was a Toyota Lexus, the Lexus car, which I now have. It's a very good car. We're talking about driving tests in the 30s. I don't believe there was such a thing as a driving test in the 30s. What you did in those days, my father and I would get in the car on a Saturday morning and drive to Uniontown, 17 miles away on Route 119. I would learn to drive at the age of 13 or 14. It wasn't quite legal, but he was there with me, and it was quite common for people to drive with their parents, and I did. And when I got to be 16 years of age and licensed, you just got in the car and drove over and got your license, and they handed it to you. And if you could drive that far and you get that far, that was it. I don't think there was any great test problems. I'm accused of being a very skillful driver at a high speed. They claim that I am not necessarily a good driver at slow speeds. As a matter of fact, I think that it's much better to drive at high speeds, because then nobody can hit you. You're just going very rapidly. But my girlfriends and wives constantly tell me that I drive too fast. Some years ago, after we became associated with the Ryan Aeronautical Company, and during the time I went down to meet the new president of Ryan Aeronautical when we had just joined them. I was introduced to him by him, who was in his office visiting from Texas, a guy named Paul Thayer, who turned out to have been a very qualified test pilot for airplanes all over the world. And Paul said to me, "You're going to buy, your company going to buy Ryan Aeronautical?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "Then you have to join the Conquistadors, because you will be the head of Ryan Aeronautical, and that's part of the aviation." I said, "What is a Conquistador?" And it says, "Well, Howard Hughes formed a society called the Conquistadores del Cielo, Conquerors of the Sky, when he took his first airplane, commercial passengers, from New York to Los Angeles. And he had a party after that, which eventually became the Conquistadors, which he sponsored. We fooled around. We have 2 meetings a year. One of them is at the Abarre Ranch in Wyoming. We ride horses, and we pretend that we are conquerors of the sky. And we pretend that Coronado started this, and he had his generals in New Mexico, and he wanted to praise them. And he marched them all down the mountain to a riverside, and they asked them each what they wanted to do and what they'd like. And the guy that won the prize for that was the guy who said he wanted to be in charge of the sky, and he wanted to be a conqueror of the sky, and he wanted to fly airplanes and be the conqueror of the sky. And so we have fun with that every year, and we have an initiation ceremony to induct new members. If somebody is a new president of the American Airlines, he's bound and determined. We're bound and determined he's going to be a member of our organization. And all of the airlines and airplane manufacturers and engine manufacturers or black box manufacturers are members. And we have a ball, pretending that we've just conquered the sky again. Well, Neil Armstrong and I got to be acquainted when he was a student pilot, learning how to land something on the moon.
There you go, 1 minute to take. You guys take care.
See you later.
And you know, you can imagine that we had to have a way in which the radar would tell him exactly how many feet he had left. And he had to blast by a reverse engine an air stream going down to the ground to slow him down, you see, and he had to know exactly where he was.
2.5, picking up some guts. 3 feet, 2.5 down. Big shadow. And left to 30. 4 forward. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 30 seconds. Down a half. 30 seconds forward, just. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. ATA at a descent. 113 is in. We've had shutdown. We copy you down, Eagle. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
We built the combination of the motor to turn on and off the airstream and the radar that would tell him exactly how many feet he had. And we had him and Gene Cernan and a couple of others come down to us in the San Diego area and Los Angeles area, and we taught them how to do this. And nobody knew whether it was going to work or not. And he got to learn. So he got to be an associate of mine. And after he landed on the moon, and we made him a member of the Conquistadors, and he's been very active in bringing people in the aerospace business, in the lunar business, in the space business, into the conquistadors themselves, and giving them the proper respect. And but he was a member and has been a strong friend of mine ever since. Given the opportunity to have my name associated with Carnegie Tech was a great thing. I had been a member of the Board of Trustees when we merged it with Mellon Institute of Science, and became, instead of Carnegie Tech, it became Carnegie Mellon University. And the Mellon family had been very supportive of that merger. And later on, I was just so pleased with the fact that I knew the presidents, had one of them teach me some courses years ago, and I was able to imagine that I had made a lot of money because of my Teledyne stock holdings. And so I promised the people that had asked me, one of the presidents of Carnegie Tech, if I would give them some money and they would build a new engineering building. So we built a new engineering building, and I was able to do that. I'm very proud of the fact that my stock holdings of that company, Teledyne, then went up after I had made this decision, so that I had more money after I built the building than I had before. That's, I think, a God-given benefit. And so it meant a lot to me to have my whole family there, and we broke the ground for the building, and then 4 or 5 years later, the building was finished, and all the engineering people moved into it, and the departments of engineers were in charge of this building. It was a very, very fine thing for me. The family then went, and I told them that the reason that I did that was because I learned how to spell metallurgy with 2 L's. M-E-T-A-L-L-U-R-G-Y, 2 L's. If I were to talk to my grandchild, or any one of them, about what to do, what they should do, I should tell them that they should work hard and enjoy every minute of their life of working hard, and keep their promises to their family to work real hard. And if they ever make any money, which they find makes them comfortable, they would give that money away happily to help other people in their support of life and their ability to work hard and sincerely with the world at large. That is the reason that you live the next hour and the next minute, and certainly the next week or two.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what What a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, yeah.
Well, he had
Just casual thing. That's all we did at Teledyne.
so he was just, I had to teach him how to land the damn thing on the moon without messing it up. The world had spent a lot of money for that, you know.
And I remember, you know, because seeing that and that it's going through my head.
Yes,
the
yes.
landing on the moon.
Yes.
And he's going, you know, down 20 feet.
Yeah.
And he's counting the feet.
He's counting the feet. That's right.
That's exactly what you were talking
That's right. We did. Yeah, we did that, and then I was there in Houston area with when that happened, and I was there especially when he had to take off, when he and Gene there were all there, and they were taking off, and a red light lit, and nobody knew exactly what happened, but a red light lit, and there was a delay of quite a few minutes before they allowed him to blast off. I remember, I can't remember now whether the red light finally went out and they said yes, or maybe the red light hadn't gone off and they didn't know what was going on, and we said yes anyway. And anyway, somebody gave him the permission to blast off, and he blasted off and came home. It was just fine.